people, just to kick you off, when they talk about greenhouse gas reductions, they talk about pumping less of the stuff into the atmosphere. You say we can capture some of those gases and store them where they do no harm. Now, this idea of clean coal is a game changer, would be a game changer for sure, but is it a bit of a dangerous illusion? In other words, how green can black really be?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so what I'm going to try and do is try and show you some of the things which we might be able to do to live with our present addiction to the fossil fuel. So, as has been said, all industrialized economies use about 80% or more fossil fuels, coal, gas, and oil to power the lifestyle we all enjoy, to make the electricity, the transport, grow a lot of the food we have, get around, training shoes, CDs, all that equipment. When Edinburgh Castle was built here, people didn't have any of that. They still managed to live, they still managed to have big buildings, and it just shows what a radical change we've had in about 250, 300 years. And in Scotland, we're very conscious that a lot of the Industrial Revolution started there with the use of coal. We invented a lot of that Industrial Revolution. And what's happening now is people in Scotland and in the UK, of course, are trying to find ways of ameliorating some of those effects. What I'm going to try and point out to you is why we need to do this, how we're going to do it, where and when, in less than 10 minutes now. And we've heard that we're going to increase our energy consumption inexorably, not just Western economies, but industrialized nations. And I want to point out how significant that is, and I'll come back to this again near the end. Here's the history of the world in one picture. Okay, so 4,500 million years ago, the Earth was created. For the first 2,900 or 3,000, 4,000, we know very little about it. After about 600 million years ago, fossiliferous life started. Then you find fossils you might know and love, like trilobites, like ammonites, like dinosaurs through here, the chalk, South Cliffs of Dover, all that sort of thing. You get up to very close to the end, and then we appear. Tiny sliver, less than the thickness of that red line. And that's now called the Anthropocene by many people, because at this time, humans, have a much bigger influence on the planet than a lot of the planetary processes. We control now a lot of what's going into the atmosphere, into the ocean, into the rivers, and the entire land, having followed the rise of farming. That's difficult because we know about climate change. I missed out the slide of temperature warming because we've just experienced unseasonable temperature warming the past few days. We all know that happens. On average, the world's getting hotter. Much more difficult thing. Carbon dioxide in the atmosphere dissolves in the upper part of the ocean, primary school chemistry. You can see offshore of Italy what's going to happen as that carbon dioxide dissolves in the ocean. That's what the ocean looks like today, nice diverse ecosystem in the ocean. A kilometre away offshore of Italy, same district, here are natural carbon dioxide springs elevating the acidity of that water, ocean death. Okay? That's happened 5 times already in the history of the world through fossiliferous life. That fossiliferous life has had 20%, 30%, sometimes 70% extinction. And I'll show you a slide again at the end showing we are headed for one of those extinctions right now. We're doing everything correctly to be right on an extinction pathway. We also know that we're in an unprecedented time because we can reconstruct the acidity of the ocean water for 20, 25 million years. Here's the pH, which is a measure of acidity. Acids down, alkalines up. The point is that's pretty constant for 25 million years. Industrialization, use of coal, gas, and oil. We've got a measurable decrease of pH, a measurable acidity change of 30% already. Okay? In your lifetimes, that will change another 70%. Okay? We don't know what the consequences of that are in detail. What we can go to is the geological record, and we know that the top species on the Earth at those extinction times become extinct. That's us. So the problem is this: power stations, large centralized power stations, large centralized industrial facilities. These both happen to be in the UK. The solution could be this. How can we find a way of continuing to burn that fossil fuel whilst capturing the emissions, whilst not letting them out into the atmosphere? Is there a smart way of doing that? Here it is on a page. Here is mining the fuel, whether it's coal mines, whether it's extracting oil and gas out from below the ground, taking that fuel to the power plant where it's burnt, combusted. At the moment, we dump that in our neighbour's basket into the atmosphere. It's like throwing your rubbish into next door's wheelie bin. We can get away with that because nobody cares too much, except that we now know that the acidity of the ocean is going up. We now know that the planet is warming. What we can do is build the capture equipment. We can pipeline that CO2 for 10 kilometers, for 500 kilometers, for 1,000 kilometers, and inject that deep below ground into saltwater-filled bodies of rock, which have no use other than that. That's been going on since 1996. Here offshore of Norway, midway between Scotland and Norway, extract oil out of the ground with 15% carbon dioxide in it, extract the carbon dioxide, inject the carbon dioxide back into the ground. That's been going on about it. Does anybody know about that? Put your hand up if you know about that. What a well-informed audience. But the rest of the people don't know about it because it works extremely well. If it was a disaster, you'd know all about it. Okay, so this has been injecting 1 million tons a year, every year since 1996. It works. Well, what we need is 1,000 more of those. Okay, if you can do that, take the carbon dioxide out of the fuel, you can do other things as well. Inject the carbon dioxide underground. We've already got too much carbon dioxide in the air for sustainable ice caps. We have to reduce the present-day carbon dioxide. There are propositions to scrub the air, put air through large aircraft hangars, car for scale, it's American. Take the carbon dioxide out of the air, but you have to put that carbon dioxide somewhere when it goes off the screen. Underground, safest place. Lots of natural examples, carbon dioxide underground. Proposition, build artificial trees to do that. They're Americans, why not? Why not use real trees? So real trees take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. We can burn coal or gas and gasify that biomass, 10% of that biomass, co-combusted, fired together, burned together in a power station, capture the carbon dioxide, all of that. We have a slow pump from the atmosphere back into the ground. We need things like that to get us back to a sustainable level of carbon dioxide. At the moment, that costs money. How much are we prepared to pay? That's what the debate's all around. Are you prepared to pay the price of a night out in London to decarbonize your energy system? That's all it is. It's about 60, 100 pounds a year per household to do that. My numbers, Adam. But it's a relatively cheap price for an industrialized country to do that, yet we're fighting shy of doing that. We need to bite the bullet and do the right thing for the right reasons. This is actually happening. Here's the first one being built in Canada. That will capture 1 million tons a year from 2014. Here's the next one in Texas. That's going to go ahead, and that will also be 2014 or 2015. Here's the European one in the Netherlands. Capture here in a new coal-fired power plant, store it offshore. And if we don't do this, just to remind you, here's geological time, extinction number 1. This is abundance of life. Extinction number 1, extinction number 2, 3, 4, 5. And here we are, we're about, if we do nothing, we'll be number 6, but won't be anybody around to see it. And this is the proposition in Britain. We're now not leading, perhaps, but we're going to be certainly best followers. We can do this at gas plants. We can do this at coal plants. We can even do this by injecting carbon dioxide to get more oil out and still be in a carbon negative position. So this has a huge possibility, but it needs to get built. Thank you.
Well, as a journalist, I'm of course part of a near-extinct species anyways, but I hope we'll never get to stage 6. Stuart, you mentioned cost. 60 to 100 pounds a year in a country like the UK sounds pretty much doable, but what about China? With all that abundant dirty fuel available, can we do this on a scale necessary for the world?
I don't think Chinese are stupid. I think Chinese are very sensible people. I've never personally been to China, but people who go to China tell me that the air quality in a lot of cities is not very good. The Chinese are well aware that they have lots of climate change, planetary change issues in the inland areas with semi-desert areas. If we do this sort of thing to show how it can be designed, how it can operate, how the technology can work, then that's a signal to the world, along with those American and North Canadian projects, and then other people will follow, because everybody knows this has to be done. It's a question, you have to move forward together. Nobody's going to go too far ahead to put themselves at a disadvantage. So I think, yes, it can be done.
Let me throw it open to the floor. Any questions? Gentleman over here.
Hi, it's Doug Parr from Greenpeace. Thanks, Stuart, for that. Very interesting. I suppose I've got two comments, really. One is, of course, that it's continuing a fossil fuel dependence, and we can see most obviously, for example, in the Total rig in the North Sea at the moment, that has its own issues, both about climate and pollution. And secondly, it seems to me that this is, like a number of things, a kind of end-of-pipe solution, which is dealing with waste. It's trying to store waste or have waste that is not actually being eliminated at source. And I suppose I would say, how satisfactory is it that you are creating wastes by continuing this process of fossil fuel dependence, rather than dealing with it at source, so that these wastes are going to last an awfully long time, obviously. They might leak out, there might be continued issues with them. So it's not actually tackling it at source, is it? It's still got wastes that we have to take responsibility for.
Yeah. So I agree with everything you say, really. This is not a unique or only solution. This is, like most things people have done, a transient solution. Ultimately, you would ideally stop mining coal, you would stop you wouldn't go for tar sands, you wouldn't go for shale gasification, but the cheap price dictates that that's what we all subscribe to. If governments have the courage to put a higher price on carbon, then that will change. That's a political action which needs to happen to encourage behaviour change amongst whole societies. And waste, yes, the waste is a problem, but this is a relatively untoxic waste. Of course, we're surrounded by carbon dioxide now. There's 4% carbon dioxide in your out-breath, so we're going to be up at 1.5% in the room by the time we've finished, so we're not going to die of that. And but we need to get rid of it because it's having an adverse effect on the planetary system. But there are also other technologies which produce waste, and in some ways one of the blockages for carbon dioxide storage is the legal treatment, because it's being in some ways injudiciously targeted. It's on uneven playing field. So carbon dioxide storage in legal terms has to demonstrate clearly 100% storage for infinite amounts of time, which is totally over the top. And I compare that, let's say, with radioactive waste storage, where we have a £70 billion liability for the electricity we've used and our parents have used and even our grandparents have used, and that's an unsolved liability. And yet radioactive waste can be taken on board, owned by the state, so there's no liability to the producers for storing that waste. The radioactive waste is going to be subsidized for its storage, and the radioactive waste will be allowed to leak out in a certain amount within limits, and yet we're putting much more difficult regulations onto a much more difficult and serious problem. And I think the politics is all wrong.
If you're very quick and very concise, we've got time to cluster two questions, and then of course we need very concise answers as well. Gentleman here in the front, and then I'll follow up with the gentleman over there. Please identify yourself. Hi
there, Greg Offer from Imperial College. A question about India and China and other developing countries where the price of coal is actually masked by government policy, and they're actually seeing declining capacity factors of coal-fired power stations caused by constraints on domestic production and expensive imports. So if you're trying to introduce a technology which actually reduces the amount of electricity you get per ton of coal, why on earth would they do that?
Let's take the second question and then answer both.
Dr. Gordon McMillan from MEND. I share your interest in behaviour change. I work with childhood obesity, but I also recognise there is a future generation that we have responsibility for. My question is, I'm also a social entrepreneur, and that merits my question. So the question is, given that it's an Olympic year, would it not be an interesting legacy to suggest to the British population that they might want to donate £100 to pilot your carbon capture and storage system and invite the government to match fund that?
Okay, so two quite different questions there. And the first one, we talked about China briefly. India is a different country. We might tend to lump them together as viewed from our perspective in Europe, but I think they're entirely different countries, need different solutions. And the Indians will not go this route at the moment. They will go this route when they find an Indian solution for India, and that's absolutely fine. That should not stop us doing a solution which works for us. Second type of solution, yes, I think we need serious engagement with the public to get the public to realise what a major issue energy is, and that's what a lot of speakers should talk about tonight. It's a fundamental part of our culture which we're not paying attention to, so anything like you suggest, if you could get that buy-in, that would be terrific. If you can organise it in time, then I'll come.
Well, we could spend all night talking about this particular issue, but I'm afraid we're going to have to move on. Thank you so much,
Okay,
Stuart.
pleasure.
Thank you.